What's up, everybody? It is Jordan here from Wednesday Night Warhammer. We're doing a Tyranid tier list. A tier list. It's been around 6 months since we've done it the last time. There's been a lot of things that has changed about our faction. It's been 2 balanced data slates, I believe. We have a new detachment, some changes to some of our abilities, of course, a little bit of shifting of points, and 3 new data sheets, basically. That being the Psychophage, and then both of the new Raveners. So I thought, after a couple of games under my belt with the new changes that happened in early June and a little bit of time to reflect on the Tyranids and playing different factions and everything, I thought now would be a great time to go through our codex and do another tier list for our Tyranids. So before we get started and everything, I do want to say thank you so much for watching. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, do all of those really cool things that YouTubers always say. It legitimately does really help us out. So we appreciate all the support. Then one more thing before I get going, we are doing a giveaway with our friends at Secondhand Geek. If you want your chance to win a Norn Emissary or a Norn Assimilator, all you have to do is go on their website, go through our affiliate link, and create a listing of any kind of a Warhammer unit or any kind of Warhammer thing. If you're trying to sell a bunch of Gargoyles or something, post them on Secondhand Geek, and then you'll be immediately entered into a giveaway for a Norn Emissary. We're giving away 3 to 3 different people, and that drawing will be July 30th on one of our live streams. But enough of all of that kind of stuff. Thank you again, Secondhand Geek. But I want to get started into our tier list. Let's talk about our tiers first. First up, we have S tier. S tier is pretty self-explanatory. S tier is going to be the units that you're going to want to have in every single one of your army lists. Regardless of detachment, regardless of what kind of style of game that you are playing, if you're playing Tyranids, you're probably going to include at least one of these units within your army list. They kind of make Tyranids do the Tyranid thing. A tier is going to be strong choices, but this might differ from playstyle. This might differ from detachment, or what kind of missions you're playing. I still think that these units are going to be very strong choices, but this can kind of change depending on your playstyle and the way that you see Tyranids as well. But these units are, of course, very strong choices. B tier units are going to be pretty good choices. They're not going to be bad choices. A little bit lower than A tier. A lot of these units might be heavily detachment dependent. So we have a couple of detachments that I think are heavily going to favor that. If you think of Assimilation Swarm, just a unit having the Harvester keyword is going to allow for it to be a little bit more prevalent in that detachment, of course, because they're a little bit more limited. And the same thing goes for Vanguard Onslaught as well. There's a lot of very powerful abilities in that detachment, and they all focus around the Vanguard Invader keyword. C tier is going to be, these units are a weak choice. Maybe it's a unit that you really like to play. Maybe it's a unit that you think is very, very cool, which is sweet. I like that thought process too. But most of the time, if we're thinking about Tyranids in the competitive scope, we're going to be leaving those units on the shelf. And last but certainly not least, I've already started us off with our 2 Hierodules. I miss them dearly. They're the biomass tier. These units are going to be best reclaimed to remake other units within the Tyranid Codex. So let's get started with Barbgaunts. I have gone back and forth on Barbgaunts throughout the edition. I think their ability is very strong. If you're taking Barbgaunts to do damage, I don't think you're really taking Barbgaunts in that point. I think they're very strong. I really like their board control ability. -1 to your movement and -1 to advanced and charges. Seems very strong. And just being able to slow down a unit for a turn seems great. I like to use them by putting them in strat reserves. And then if I'm going up against an army like Custodes, or maybe like Dark Angels or something with a big unit that just kind of wants to trundle up the board, I'll bring them up the board edge, I'll shoot at them and make sure that they can't get into my Exocrines or Maleceptors or whatever, and keep that unit away and at bay. That being said, I don't think they slot into every single list, and then them being 55 points is pretty cheap, but I do feel like our points totals are pretty tight once we fit in our staples and the core of a lot of our list. So Barbgaunts kind of have a hard time fitting into a lot of lists. And because of that, I think I'm going to put them to start at the top of B tier. I think they are a good choice if you can fit them in. I don't think that they are ever going to be a bad choice. Maybe right now in the meta, because knights are so prevalent, maybe you don't really see Barbgaunts too much, but you know, who knows? If it shifts back to a bunch of custodian guards or or terminators like I was talking about, you might be seeing more Barbgaunts. I definitely don't think they are a wrong choice. Next unit, the Biovore. He's going straight up to S tier. I think the Biovore is probably one of the best units in the game right now. And the fact that we have him as Tyranids, I'm very excited. It offers for a whole bunch of board control with the Spore Mines. You can get some secondaries with them as well. You can move block with them. I did a whole video on how to play the Biovore. I think it's called Biovore Briefing. I really love the Biovore. He also holds your home field too, you know, and a lot of factions don't have a unit that is as useful as the Biovore is just sitting on the home field objective. So you think about all of those things that I said that the Biovore does first, and then also realize that he's also holding your home field. It's very strong. It's a very, very, very good unit. It's top of S tier. I would not be surprised if at the end of the video he is still near the top, if not the top of S tier. You got to play the Biovore. You got to play him. Next up, we have the Broodlord. So with leaders, I think with most of the leaders, we're going to assume that they're going to be attached to their unit, because I mean, it would be kind of neat to play a Broodlord just by himself. However, I think most of the time we're thinking of the Broodlord as he's attached to his 10-man or sometimes a 5-man Genestealer squad. I think he really, really helps those units. However, I think the Broodlord is a very strong choice. Even if he gets down to just himself, he can kind of hit like a truck. Especially in Invasion Fleet, when you have lethals or sustain, he can do some nasty things with his twin linked and dev wounds. I think I'm going to put him for right now at the top of A tier. Another thing that is really good about the Broodlord is his -1 to hit in combat. It makes the Genestealers and Broodlord actually deceptively durable. If you think in Invasion Fleet, especially, if you get -1 to hit, everybody has at least a 5-up invulnerable save, and you pop the 5-up, feel no pain. Even if your opponent is running like 2 damage weapons, that's a pretty tough nut to crack, honestly, with the Broodlord. So, top of A tier, definitely for the Broodlord. One of my favorite units throughout the edition. I've been happy to run him. Moving right along, the Carnifex. Carnifexes are really cool. Carnifexes are probably the reason that I started with Tyranids. I saw this picture of this Carnifex like ramming into a rhino. And it was sweet. I thought it was one of the coolest things that I've ever seen, and I was like, yep, I gotta play that army. However, like them baseline hitting on 4s, and like the Blood Surge is a cool rule. However, the Carnifexes are one of those units where if they are not buffed, then they're not necessarily good. And so we have other units within the codex that I feel like just kind of function in the same space as Carnifexes do, if not a little bit better. I think the thing that Carnifexes do have going for them is they are pretty cheap. I think they're the cheapest singleton monster that we have, and they're not easy to kill. You know, 2-up save, team 9, that's pretty good. So your opponent actually has to dedicate something in order to kill the Carnifexes. I think they're a pretty powerful choice in Crusher Stampede if you run a singleton of one of them, if you have the points. It's a neat idea because as soon as they get hurt, their efficiency gets way better with a +1 to hit. And then if they ever get to the below half, then that's pretty good too, +1 to wound. So they're definitely an interesting choice in Crusher Stampede. However, I think they're going to be at bottom of B tier. They might be leaking over to C tier, in my opinion. With Carnifexes, they're just not 100% hitting the mark for me right now. Moving right along, we have Death Leaper. And in this tier list, they have the older versions of this. So we don't have the Death Leaper with the incredible flesh cape, unfortunately. Or fortunately, you know, depending on your opinion of that. I think Death Leaper's pretty good. I think at 80 points, he's very competitively priced. I like that he's a lone op. I like that he's fights first. I like that he, you know, gets you a CP if you kill a character with precision. All of those things are very good. The 4-up invulnerable save makes him way more durable than I think people think at first point, as well as stealth. You know, he has access to pretty good stratagems in Vanguard Onslaught and just getting buffed through Invasion Fleet, as well as doing some Battle Shock shenanigans in Synaptic Nexus. There's a lot of cool things that this guy can do. However, I think most of the time he gets outshined by the Lictor. The Lictor being 20 points less, being able to rapid ingress for free, and then everything else is just basically kind of doing the same thing as the Death Leaper. If you're careful with your Lictor, then you can keep them alive for quite a whole lot of time. So I'm not sure the 4-up invul matters too much in that argument. And for those reasons, I think I'm going to put Death Leaper in A tier behind Broodlord. I think he's a very strong choice. Some people might argue he's better than the Broodlord. But from my experience, I'm taking Broodlord way more often than I'm taking Death Leaper. So he's going to be put in the A tier right there. Moving right along is the Exocrine. Exocrine, the entire edition has just been a unit that you just take. It's just really good, and it doesn't really matter the detachment you're playing it in. It is always going to do what it does, and that is a pretty efficient gun for a relatively low points cost, 140 points as of right now, and the strength as well as the number of shots that the Exocrine can put out is pretty good. And then the fact that he helps all of your other bugs with their accuracy of their rate of fire is even better. Seems very, very strong. Being able to give reroll 1s to your entire army after you've also already done damage to something seems pretty good. I am going to preemptively put him bottom of S tier or top of A tier. I think I'm gonna put top of A tier for Exocrine. However, I do feel like the Exocrine is one of those units consistently throughout the entire edition has just been a unit you take. You know, it's just a very, very good unit. Next up is Gargoyles. Now, if you are a fan of the channel, if you have sat through any of our Army List review shows or any of our live battle reports, you know that I love Gargoyles. I think Gargoyles are very, very strong. They move incredibly fast. They shoot and scoot. They have a high level of OC2 on each of them. The number of games that I have won because of a Gargoyle taking an opponent off of 2 objectives in 1 turn, denying my opponent 10 points is a lot. I've done that a lot of times. The amount of times that I have taken an opponent off their objective in my turn by deep striking and then shooting and then scooting onto the point is very, very high. In fact, they're really good. I'm going to put them in S tier. I think they really, really serve the purpose that they need. You know, in Tyranids, we're all about board control. We're all about primary denial. It goes very well with Shadow in the Warp. I think Gargoyles do a great job of activating in that way. And so I'm happy to include them in pretty much every single one of my lists. It's been a long time since I've written a list without at least 1 squad. I'm on two squads of Gargoyles right now in my Invasion Fleet list. I love them. I think Gargoyles are phenomenal. Moving right along, we have Genestealers up next. Genestealers are very good. Oftentimes I'm, slamming them with a Broodlord, but I've actually seen a lot of people have a good number of success with running just 5-man minimum size Genestealers, which makes sense, because you don't get dev wounds necessarily, but at 75 points, you'll get 20 attacks hitting on 2s, reroll 1s, reroll 1s to wound if they are on an objective. That's not bad, and AP2 is really, really good. You think of them as a really good skirmishing unit in that case, especially if they infiltrate, then you can infiltrate them and then move up and then charge, maybe block something for a turn or something. For 75 points, that's pretty good. I have almost always run just 10 with the Broodlord. The fact that they get dev wounds from that, and the 40 attacks that they can get, as well as all the buffs that they can add from different detachments, they activate really, really well. And they hurt. A lot of people do not like going into Genestealers. I also often use them as a heroic intervention threat, which is a good thing to do as well. Because of all those reasons, I'm going to put them just above the Broodlord, because I think there have been people that have been running them to great success, just as the 5-mans. And the fact that you don't really need to have the Broodlord with them to still have a functional competitive unit, I think Genestealers are pretty good. They're right at the top of A tier, probably a little bit lower than the Exocrine, just like we put them there, but I think Genestealers are always going to be a great add. Next up, we have the Harpy. Now, in 9th edition, Warhammer had a problem with flyers. Flyers were disgusting, and that statement did not ignore the Harpy. I think the Venom Cannons were like strength 9, which was like one of the highest strengths you could get. Is very good strength, and then they did 4 damage apiece, so they were just disgusting. And Games Workshop did not want that to happen anymore. So Harpies only have a max. They have like D3 blast with their Venom Cannons. They can drop Spore Mines, but the Spore Mines have to be dropped within 6 inches of the Harpy, or you use them as a bomber. I don't love them. I think that this might come to a shock. I think Harpies are firmly in the biomass material. They don't do too much. They're very expensive. They just take up a whole bunch of points, and that's about it for right now. So I think I would not be surprised if some way, somehow, Warhammer eventually phases out flyers. And I definitely think the rules being bad just kind of makes it so they're that. So Harpies have been effectively phased out of the game just because I don't think their rules are very good and their points costs are way too high. However, moving on to a flyer aircraft that is super sweet, the Harridan. I love the Harridan. I think the Harridan is very cool. I have one. Do we see it in the background? Oh, way off in the distance. He's right over there, below my strange large head. I really like the Harridan. I don't think it's necessarily great, but I think there is some really cool, fun play that you can use with the Harridan. Invasion Fleet, giving it a 5-up Feel No Pain, it seems very strong, as well as just sustains and lethals. It functions pretty well in Crusher Stampede as well. You can do its ability so that it is +1 to wound. Right off the bat, it hurts itself, and then the next turn, it will be +1 to hit, and you can continue doing that ability. So in Crusher Stampede, it's always +1 to hit and +1 to wound, effectively, and that can be pretty devastating. However, the fact that it's like 655 points, I think, or something like that, it is going to be inherently a weak choice. So that's going to be top of C tier right now, but it's only top of C tier because there's nothing left. There's nothing else in C tier. I love the Harridan. Unfortunately, it's not a very competitive choice right now. Next up is Haruspex. Haruspex is a very cool unit. I really like how it tries to have like a Swiss Army knife thing of it can technically activate into anything and have relatively okay success. You know, its big meaty claws, as I call them, are really good into, you know, your armor and being able to punch through that. Strength 14 is one of the highest melee strength we have in our codex. In fact, I think it's higher than the Assimilator. I think it's the same as Old One Eye. So it being able to do that, and then the vast number of attacks that the Tentacled Maw has is also very strong as well. It's good into infantry and really benefits from, you know, Invasion Fleet, and then lethals, crits on 5s, and Assimilation Swarm as well. Putting buffs onto her Haruspex makes it feel really, really good. As well as Crusher Stampede, the number of attacks, whenever it gets damaged, +1 to hit, this thing being able to hit on 2s instead of 3s is a phenomenal buff. However, I think it has trouble getting places. I think if I'm running a Haruspex, I'm either just signing it off to die when I send it out, or I'm going to maybe try and do like a rapid ingress so that I get a very, very easy charge. The fact that it doesn't have access to advanced charge or something like that makes it kind of tough to get in. And also the fact that it doesn't have an invulnerable save means that it is actually more fragile than you would think. Toughness 11, of course, helps with that. But those are kind of the downfalls of the Haruspex. Because of those things, I think I'm going to put it B tier. I do think a Haruspex is better than a singleton Carnifex, even though it's 10 points higher. But I don't know. If I'm thinking overall list, the likelihood of me taking a Barbgaunt versus a Haruspex, probably Barbgaunts are better, I would say. A Hierophant. One of the only models that I don't have. Hierophant. It's pretty cool. It's our Bio Titan. It is ginormous. It has a goofy transport size. I think it's like 20 or something, 22 or something. It has okay guns. It has a pretty cool flamer, and it has a very similar profile to the Harridan. It's a lot of points. It's almost half your list when you decide to include a Hierophant. I think there has been some people talking about playing it with Subterranean Assault because you can pop it out and then it supposedly will get a 6-inch charge. The problem with that is the ability to fit it on the field. This thing is ginormous. I think I've only seen one in person once, and it is just huge. The amount of space that it takes up is wild. And if your opponent is able to just screen it out, then you're just kind of sad. And then you have a Hierophant in your strat reserves that is just going to stay there. So, not necessarily something that you want to have. But yeah, so all of those things, I think if you bring the Hierophant, you're memeing a little bit. Which is okay, which is phenomenal. But I'm going to put that at the bottom of C tier. Yes, I think the Harridan is better than the Hierophant. It might be a close race because of Subterranean Assault. Again, I don't have a Hierophant to try that. I would like to try that one day. But at this point, I think a Harridan is probably just a little bit better than a Hierophant. Moving right along, we have the Hive Crone. I'll be honest with you, I'm not going to spend too much time on the Hive Crone. I think it's worse than the Harpy. Because its ranged weapons aren't very good, and it doesn't have the ability to drop Spore Mines. I think Spore Mines are pretty cool. Again, the Harpy is limited on where it can drop those Spore Mines. It does have the option to bomb it. And the Harpy is good against flying. I don't know. It's just another one of those units where I think you're only really going to want to play it if you really, really love the way the model looks. I don't think it necessarily fits in to a competitive style of play with Tyranids. So, second from the top of the biomass tier for the Hive Crone. Now, the Hive Guard. Some people have been saying that they've had success with the Hive Guard and have been doing pretty well with Hive Guard. They have an interesting Overwatch rule. I think that's about it. I'll be honest with you. Hive Guard are one of those units which were absolutely busted in the past with their indirect. You just poured a whole bunch of buffs onto the Hive Guard, and the Hive Guard would delete a unit per turn, and then you could spend 2 CP to activate them again, and then they would probably delete another unit. So I think in this edition, they're like, let's not have the Hive Guard do that. Their indirect gun is not very good now. It's 24 inches, strength 6, I believe, and AP 1. So that means basically all of the time, your opponent is going to be saving on their armor save if you are shooting from indirect. So that's not something that I'm super, super excited about. And then the shot cannon, here's the thing. People have been really excited about the shot cannon. Somebody said that they've tucked shot cannons in to deal with knights. I don't think that's the best idea. They do have anti-vehicle 3 up. However, my biggest downfall with a Hive Guard is their AP 1. So if your opponent is conscientious about how they move about the table, all they need to do is tuck Canis Rex, big, huge oven mitt behind a ruin, and then he has cover, and then is basically saving on his armor save the entire time. So I'm not a huge fan of the Hive Guard. In my opinion, I would probably take a Harridan before I take Hive Guard. which is saying quite a bit. I don't love the Hive Guard. I don't know. Convince me otherwise, Tell me down in the comments below. But I am going to put Hive Guard in the middle of C tier as a weak choice in between the Harridan and the Hierophant. Yes, I think the Harridan is better than Hive Guard. A unit that I think is very good is the Winged Hive Tyrant. I really like the Winged Hive Tyrant. It can get around the table pretty quick. It's 12-inch speed, of course, in Vanguard Onslaught. I think that he is a must-have. I think you have to have him in Vanguard Onslaught. His -1 to attack psychic debuff is very strong. If you're playing up against orcs, if you're playing against World Eaters or Blood Angels or a very melee leaning skew, you're going to want to have a Winged Hive Tyrant. He's just really good. I think his CP reduction cost now going only to once per battle round, I think it's honestly fine. And the fact that both Hive Tyrants have gone down 30 points to balance that ability, I'm super excited about running them. I think that actually makes both Hive Tyrants better. Just because having 30 more points in your list means you can maybe swap out a unit to, maybe you go from an Exocrine to a Maleceptor or something like that. It's probably not the best example. However, I definitely think more points is always better. And I have not been missing the secondary ability going on your opponent's and your own turn. Oftentimes it was just kind of, okay, I guess I re-roll damage again or whatever, something like that. But thinking about placing the Winged Hive Tyrant, I think he is honestly top of B tier. I think he is pretty good, but I think there's going to be a lot of detachments that you are just not running him because the Hive Tyrant is going to be better. I think in Vanguard Onslaught, he definitely is way better than the Walking Hive Tyrant, just because he gets the keyword, he can advance and charge. However, if we're thinking about overall scope of things, I think he's significantly worse than the Walking Hive Tyrant. Speaking of, we have the Walking Hive Tyrant right here. His aura is very, very good. You get Assault and you get Lethals. So in detachments like Invasion Fleet, you can have Sustain and Lethals into Infantry. So if you castle up with Exocrine and you shoot at an infantry unit and you're next to the Hive Tyrant, that unit is going to hurt quite a bit. And so it's super, super sweet. You also get the CP reduction as before. And then the fact that this guy got brought down 30 points, very, very, very strong. In my opinion, I think the best way to run him is with the Bone Sword Lash Rip and then the Monstrous Scything Talons. Because you get a whole bunch of attacks. And if you're an invasion, then that's just more times to proc the lethals or sustain. I think the Venom Cannon is good as well. However, the number of times where it just hasn't done anything, and then I would have wished that I had more melee attacks is pretty high up there. I think overall, Tyranids like to lean a little bit more shooting than they do melee. At least right now, I think a lot of our units are more ranged as opposed to melee, although it has changed a little bit. So in that case, I think I am going to put the Hive Tyrant the bottom of S tier for right now. I think it is definitely a unit that you're going to be running most of the time, if not all of the time. Another very strong unit is our Hormagaunts. A lot of people have shifted away from Gargoyles and started running Hormagaunts instead of Gargoyles. I think that's fine. I don't think that's a bad choice. I think I still value the shoot and scoot and the range of the Gargoyles a little bit more than Hormagaunts. Yes, technically, I think Hormagaunts can move further because they advance and then they can charge. And then depending on your charge distance, you can get even further up the field. Reason why I think Gargoyles are a little bit better is because you can move that much. You can move really, really far without really endangering your Gargoyles. You can also, kind of shift around overwatches by doing their shoot and then scooting where they should be, making sure you're out of line of sight as you shoot from like spooky flamers or anything. So that's just my little bit of a debate between Hormagaunts and Gargoyles. That being said, Hormagaunts being OC2, advancing and charging, it's very good. And the fact that they're 65 points, that's very cheap as well. I really do like Hormagaunts too. I think Hormagaunts are very high up in A tier. I think I'm going to put them in between Genestealers and Broodlord. I think the Exocrine's better. I think Genestealers are probably better than Hormagaunts as well. But if we're talking about Broodlord by himself or Hormagaunts, I'm taking Hormagaunts. And they're also better than Death Leaper as well. So right in the middle of A tier. Maybe I do just below Exocrine. Maybe they're... Let's do that. I think actually Hormagaunts are probably better than Genestealers and just below in Exocrine. So they're right near the top of A tier, just below in Exocrine, just above Genestealers. Hormagaunts for the win. Lictors. I love Lictors. They're 60 points. Lone op. They infiltrate. They fights first. You can rapid ingress them for free. A really cool thing you can do with them is you can rapid ingress Lictors, and now with the hyper-adapted Raveners, then you can rapid ingress the hyper-adapted Raveners because the warding of their ability is very, very strong. So just being able to be in a place and do a thing whenever you want seems really good for the Lictors. I think with the new mission deck, the number of action secondaries is less. So I don't think it's like not mandatory that you run 3 Lictors and that's what you have to do. I think this mission deck is more about being in a place at a time or controlling an objective at a time. So I think Lictors inherently in units like that do actions like that maybe are a little bit tiny worse than what they were before, but I definitely think they're a mainstay of the army. I'm going to put Lictors just above Exocrines at the top of A tier, and maybe just pushing slightly into S tier. I think they're very good because of their ability to be places as well as how efficient they are. 60 points. 60 points is very cheap for what a Lictor does. I'm happy to have them in the codex. I'm going to place them in top of A tier. Moving right along, we have the Maleceptor. Now, Maleceptor does a lot of things. Maleceptor is durable for itself. It is also durable for other units around you. It gives -1 to hit, of course, if any enemy models are within 6 of it. That's for shooting and melee. And if those enemy units are below half starting strength, -1 to wound as well. If they are activating into a Maleceptor, that can be crippling. That can be very, very tough. I do things like if I'm taking a list with a lot of Norn Emissaries, I'll have the Norns walk the dog, per se, and they'll be hanging out with the Maleceptor so that the idea is the Maleceptor is getting whatever is hanging out or trying to activate into the Norn, -1 to hit, and then the Norn, of course, has its 5-up Feel No Pain. It can be pretty gross. In addition to all of those things, the offensive output of a Maleceptor is it's okay. It's fine. You know, I think it's slightly worse than the Exocrine. It being strength 10 is interesting. However, I feel like AP2 versus AP3 is actually a huge breaking point. And I personally would rather have strength 9 AP3 most of the time over strength 10 AP2. Just tough. I haven't necessarily run the math on that, so maybe I'm wrong, but that's my knee-jerk reaction. I do think that Maleceptors are very strong. And I think that they're going to go relatively in the bottom-ish of A tier. I'm going to put the Maleceptor just above the Death Leaper. Just above the Death Leaper. And just behind Broodlords and Genestealers. Maleceptors have actually gone down a little bit for me. I've stopped running them almost all of the time. I definitely think they function pretty well in a bunch of different detachments. They do great in Invasion, of course, because everything does well in Invasion. Crusher Stampede is really good with them as well. I think that's about it that I'm super excited about running Maleceptors. So, there it is. Mawlocs. Now, Mawlocs with Subterranean Assault. We get into a discussion. There's some discussion online about whether or not their mortals can actually function coming out of the tunnel. My knee-jerk reaction right now has always been, ask your tournament organizer. And I'm not going to lie to you. I don't, it seems like it could go either way on whether or not they can come up from Deep Strike or pop up through the tunnel and do those mortals. It's tough. We're really going to have to wait on a very specific ruling from Games Workshop as to what they can do. That being said, regardless, I'm not like in Subterranean Assault. I'd much rather bring in a Trigon or something through the tunnel than a Mawloc. Maybe the Mawloc is setting up the tunnel and then popping the mortals with 12 inches and then other things are coming out. Could be good. However, the fact that it's 145 points and a Trigon is 140, I'm not super excited about it. I do think it does have some play in Subterranean Assault, but I'm not super excited to always be running it. For those reasons, I'm going to be putting it at the bottom of B tier. I think this unit is definitely a detachment dependent. I don't think people are still yo-yoing Mawlocs in Vanguard Onslaught like we did a long time ago. I think that play has kind of gone off the side. I don't think it's a bad unit. I just think I'm going to be running other units way before I'm running a Mawloc. Moving on to Ugly Squidward. That's what I like to call this guy. This is the Mucolid Spore, I believe. It's biomass, folks. I'm sorry. I would probably run our flyers more or before I would run the Mucolid Spore. If you really want this guy in your battlefield, then use a Spore Assist, I guess, to generate him. But I would probably just not. You know, he doesn't do too much. It costs a lot of points. So, sorry. If you're a Mucolid Spore enjoyer, I apologize. Neurogaunts. Neurogaunts are interesting. They are the cheapest of our gaunts. So, and you're going to have 11 bodies. So the fact that you have 11 bodies for 45 points seems pretty good. However, that's about all they do. Yes, they can branch out Synapse, but I feel like if you're just, how do I say this? If you're planning ahead and you're able to make sure that your Neurotyrant is where it's supposed to be and passing out Synapse where you really need it, or just grouping your units in an effective manner, you're not really going to need this. And the amount of times that I've had 40 points of wiggle room in a list, or 45, is very seldom. Some people have made the argument that you use them to screen out your backfield. You could, but like having a Biovore and then a couple of shooting platforms in your backfield are probably going to be doing that regardless. And you can just string out Gargoyles to screen out your entire thing, and then they can go out and take primary that way as well. So I'm not super excited about Neurogaunts. I'm going to put them at the bottom of B tier. I actually probably like a Mawloc better than I like Neurogaunts. And this is not necessarily a detachment dependent thing. I just don't think that they are nearly that good. Maybe they're top of C tier. No, I think they're bottom of B tier, Neurogaunts, because they're 45 points, you know. Yeah, bottom of B tier for Neurogaunts. Some people really like Neurogaunts. I'm not one of those people. Apologize. Neurolictor. Now, here's a unit that has gone through the ringer throughout the edition. It started out stupid cheap. It was like 60 points, right? And immediately everyone's like, okay, you run 3 of them, boom, you get a bunch of battle shocks off, your army gets +1 to wound. It is so good. And then it went up in points a whole bunch, 90 points. And then all of a sudden everybody was like, we're not running Neurolictors, don't run them, they're bad. You know. Now they're at 80 points. It was kind of like, I feel like the conversation opens back up. There's a couple of pluses with the Neurolictor, and there's also a couple of minuses. If you think about the Neurolictor, it has that 4-up and invulnerable save, which is very tanky. It's a great thing to have. It has lone op, it has stealth. It does not have fights first if we're comparing it to the other Lictors, so that is a thing. You can do things where you place the Neurolictor so that an objective marker is wholly within 12, so that you can, if your opponent goes on the objective, but it's also like that triggers in your turn, and then your opponent has it again. I don't know. Its ability seems weird. If it was like a point and click thing at the beginning of your movement or at the end of your movement, I think it would be better. But the fact that your opponent just has its full ability to just stay outside of that range, seems not great. So, and it's also 80 points, so it's competing for the same spot that Death Leaper is. And I think oftentimes, if you're wanting a 4th Lictor in your list, you're probably just going to go with Death Leaper as opposed to Neurolictor. That being said, there are a lot of really good combos you can do with it. If you pop Shadows into a really good Shadows turn, then that could be sweet. That could be really good for you, because you get +1 to wound on a whole bunch of things. However, it's a dice game, and I don't like relying on dice too much for things like that. I'm going to put him in the middle of B tier. I do actually like a Neurolictor better than a Haruspex. Is it better than Barbgaunts? Yeah, I'd say a Neurolictor is better than Barbgaunts. So I'm putting Neurolictor directly below a Winged Hive Tyrant, in front of Barbgaunts, and in front of Haruspex, Carnifex, Mawloc, and then Neurogaunts. I think I'm pretty happy with where they are. Moving right along, we have the Neurotyrant. The Neurotyrant is a phenomenal unit. I love that it gives out Synapse. Synapse is really helpful, especially for our units if they're getting damaged. 3d6 on a battle shock check is very strong. And in addition, now that Synapse is +1 to strength as well, being able to just string out and making sure your Neurotyrant is always within 18 inches of a Lictor. So it's going to be wounding Space Marines on 2s. Very, very, very good. Bumping that Lictor up to strength 8, or like Hormagaunts, bumping up Hormagaunts to strength 4, I believe, is also very strong. In addition, its main ability, the Shadow on the Warp, giving everything a -1, is very strong as well. That is a huge increase to the efficiency and the amount of units that your opponent might fail because of that -1. So I am a huge Neurotyrant fan. Let's take a look at where it's going to lie. I think it's going to be near the upper end of A tier. Is it better than an Exocrine? Yes. Yes. I think overall, zooming out, I think a Neurotyrant is probably going to be... it's really close. It's a toss-up. Let me know in the comments below what you think. But my knee-jerk reaction, overall, you're going to be running a Neurotyrant and almost all of your lists. An Exocrine, meh, Maybe we bump a couple of things up to S tier. Let's see where we are in our tiers. I think so. I'm going to bump a couple of things up to S tier. So I'm going to bump Lictor up to S tier. And I'm going to put Neurotyrant near the bottom of S tier. Maybe he goes back to A tier, but who knows. Bottom of S tier for Neurotyrant at this point. A Norn Assimilator. So Norn Assimilator didn't change too much. It's had its keyword from the December change, I believe. So then now it functions in assimilation form. I think it's okay. The thing that I'm sad about is it does not have an invulnerable save. And that comes up more often than you would think. Because I feel like the Assimilator wants to go in and activate into some really heavy units. And the fact that those heavy units are oftentimes going to have a high number of AP. And you're going to be saving on 5s or 6s or not a save at all. Stinks. It does stink. I think the +2 to charge into monsters and vehicles that you've harpooned is kind of neat. However, if your opponent is aware of that rule and is able to play around it, it can go from like a really exciting, cool thing to do to a not so good thing to do. So that being said, I'm going to put it near the top of C tier. Yeah, the top of C tier. So it is definitely better than Harridan and a Hive Guard and then a Hierophant. I just don't think it's that great a lot of times. However, its brother, its sister, cousin maybe, the Norn Emissary, for the reasons that I just listed, that I don't like the Norn Assimilator, I like the Norn Emissary. The fact that it has a 4-up invuln all the time, the fact that it has a 4-up feeling of pain to mortal wounds. Super cool. A unit like this that has OC 15 and allows for you to have a 5-up feeling of pain, you just want to make sure that that unit is going to be durable and sitting on a point. Its wide range of weapon or like ranged attacks is weird, but can be good. I oftentimes am only doing the Melta, because the Melta just seems good. The Blast Weapon is okay as well. But yeah, I like the Norn Emissary. I think the Norn Emissary is pretty good. I'm going to put it... This might come as a shock. I think I like the Norn Emissary better than a Neurolictor. I think I'm going to put the Norn Emissary near the top of B tier. Let's just do a quick check. Is it better than the Winged Hive Tyrant? No, I don't think so. Is it better than Neurolictor? In my opinion, yes, because we have cheaper units, more efficient units that can do that role a little bit better. I think it's better than Barbgaunts because it just holds a point and is tough to deal with. Haruspex, I feel like it kind of does Haruspex jobs a little bit better. And Carnifex, Mawloc, and Neurogaunts, I feel pretty confident that I like the Norn Emissary over those options. Moving right along, we have Old One-Eye. Old One-Eye is super sweet. I think he's dope. I think he's really strong in Invasion Fleet. You attach him with 2 Carnifexes, and then you just have him go buck wild. In addition, if you have 150 points and you want a unit that's just kind of gonna hit hard, you just can slot Old One-Eye in, and he's fine as well on his own. People have been running Old One-Eye and the Carnifexes and Subterranean Assault. That's been a pretty cool combo. Getting those Carnifexes in on a 6-inch charge with full rerolls to hit, phenomenal. Love that idea. Very, very cool. I think I would run Old One-Eye before I would run a Singleton Carnifex if the points were allowed. Having 40 points, like if I said I can either have a Carnifex and a Pyrovore or Old One-Eye, I'm probably taking Old One-Eye. He has a 5-up Feel No Pain all the time. He regenerates wounds. He's not easy to deal with, and he can just be a mess if he gets into your opponent's first line. Very strong. I do like him. I wish he was a little bit less points, or if he had innate rerolls of some kind. I think that would be very good. Or if he hits on 2s. Just let Old One-Eye hit on 2s. It'd be fine, That being said, I think he's better than a Neurolictor. I think he's worse than a Norn Emissary. This might be... I'm worried I'm approaching controversial take range. Could be. But I'm going to put him just in between a Norn Emissary and a Neurolictor. I'm going to take a very brief break while I drink this bit of water. While I'm doing that, I would love it if you hit the like button and just comment what type of drink you're drinking right now, or whatever snack you're having, or what you're doing. All right? You got about 5 seconds to do that. And we're back. Thank you so much for commenting that. That was, wow, that was a hilarious comment. Good job on that one. Okay, moving right along. The Parasite of Mortrex. People on this channel love the Parasite. They call it Parasite Chan. It's got its own fan club. So if you are a Parasite of Mortrex enjoyer, you're allowed to put your Parasite at S tier. You're allowed to have that. Play your Parasite every single game. Amazing. I'm so happy for you. However, I think it's like C tier. I don't think the Parasite, it's tough because like its ability is cool, and like the Battle Shock stuff and then creating Rippers is kind of cool, but you have to jump through so many hoops in order to get this to happen, to create Rippers. I think the best part about the Parasite is it has Deep Strike. So you can Deep Strike in, it has Lone Op, you can do an action. One time I was playing a game and the middle objective was vacant, and my opponent didn't want to bring anything out onto the middle objective because I was just going to be able to shoot at it or charge it, whatever. I had a Parasite of Mortrex in reserves, and when they were done moving, I made sure that I rapid ingress Parasite on the center objective, and I make sure that all of his guns are outside of 12 with Parasite, and boom, Parasite of Mortrex gives me an additional 5 points of primary. That's cool. That's a good way to use the Parasite of Mortrex. However, setting that up is not always going to happen, and that's the best way to use it, in my opinion. Because of that, I'm going to put Parasite at the top of C tier. Now, there might be a lot of other factions that would love to have something like the Parasite with the Deep Strike and the Lone Op and everything like that. However, we just have access to Lictors and Deathleaper and Neurolictor, and I would just rather use those units. You know? I'm going to do some shuffling. I'm going to bring Neurogaunts down to the top of C tier and Mawloc down to the top of C tier as well, just to create a little bit more space for our other tiers. No particular reason. You know, oh, look, the Psychophage. Man, what a glow up the Psychophage has gotten. This unit is very, very good. One of the things that, there's two things that Tyranids struggle with is the low strength, the low general strength that we have as a faction, and the low AP that we have as a faction. Psychophage helps a lot for that low AP. Allows for Hormagaunts to go to AP 2, which is super sweet. Allows for Genestealers, Raveners, Maleceptors, bunch of Carnifexes, going to AP 3. If you think about the benefit of a Psychophage activating and getting additional AP, and then a Haruspex charging the thing that it just activated into, oh my gosh, that is so good. It's very good. Having the Haruspex's mini attacks being AP2, it's very disgusting. And it being a 5-up, feel no pain all the time. I think that's very strong as well. I personally don't miss the 6-up feel no pain aura that it had before. I know a lot of people do. I know a lot of people were kind of upset about that because that was kind of their playstyle with the Psychophage. However, I just feel like it's a net positive with the Psychophage. That being said, I'm going to put him middle of B tier. So he's going to go directly above Old One Eye and just below a Norn Emissary. I think he's a great support piece. He might be a little bit higher if you're doing a tier list. But in my opinion, that's kind of where he fits. And if you think about detachment dependent stuff, like a Psychophage and a Haruspex and Assimilation Swarm automatically jump up to S tier. They're very efficient at what they do. They both have the Harvester keyword. They really allow for that detachment to function, and they create some very powerful lists with him. So I love the Psychophage. He's a good unit to maybe slot in as a one of. I have a list for Invasion Fleet that has a one of Psychophage in it, and it's a pretty strong list. Moving right along, we have the Pyrovore. Now, I like the Pyrovore for a number of different reasons. First one, 40 points. Boom. That's a great reason. Just having a low point cost and having a relatively durable unit for that low point cost is a very strong case to include a Pyrovore. Next reason is he gets rid of cover. And I think that Tyranids still, maybe less so than in the past, I think Tyranids still slant towards a ranged and a shooty army. Allowing just cover to not exist for a thing for a turn because you have a 40-point unit that came in from strategic reserves and just flamed it. That's pretty strong. Helps out with Maleceptors, of course, with that AP2. And Assimilation Swarm, of course. He's very strong as well. And I like running them in 3-mans because they are very durable that way. And it's very annoying for your opponent to deal with the 3-man Pyrovores. They're sweet. They're very cool. Now, where they're placed, I think a Pyrovore is going to be near the bottom of A tier. Now, that might be pretty high, but the fact that for 40 points you can just slot him in and he functions pretty well and a whole lot of detachments, I think it's a pretty good case. Now, maybe he's in B tier. I think he's probably worse than a Deathleaper. Is he though? Is he worse than a winged Hive Tyrant? Yeah, I'd say so. So I'm going to put him near the top of B tier. He's just below the winged Hive Tyrant. Just because of the amount of versatility that he has. He's a little bit above Norn Emissary. Now, this is the trap we get into when we talk about tier list, is because a Norn Emissary, comparing a Norn Emissary to a Pyrovore that's weird, right? That's not an actual comparison. They do two very different things. They're both kind of good at what they do, but it's a strange comparison to have. So just understand, in a vacuum, the competitive level of these two units is still, I don't know, it's still debatable, you know? That's where I'm going to put him here, near the top of B tier. Detachment, like if he's in Assimilation Swarm, he's obviously better than a Norn Emissary. But if you get into like Invasion Fleet and comparing him and like Crusher Stampede and stuff, then a Norn gets better. So for right now, I'm going to put him near the top of B tier, just below a Winged Hive Tyrant. Now, the second new data sheet, I guess if we count the Psychophage, the Hyper-Adapted Raveners. These guys are good. I think they are not as good as I had originally thought they were. I played around 10 games of Vanguard Onslaught with them. I had 2 squads of 10 Raveners. And they were really good at deleting a thing. They went out, you know, you attach them with Raveners, you get sustained hits, twin linked, strength 6, vehicle 5 up, which is weird because it doesn't actually do anything. They're very good. And the flamethrower is actually stronger than I think a lot of people would think it is. I don't think they are the new unit that's going to be like holding the entire codex on its back, you know. Thinking where they are placed in a tier list is also tough because they do have the versatility of either joining or not joining with Raveners. I think if you're taking Perfectly Adapted, you have to take another squad of Raveners. So if you're taking Perfectly Adapted Raveners, then you're all of a sudden locked into, I think, 290 points. And that's a lot. They don't trade very well. They'll go out and they'll kill something, yes, but then they die very, very quickly. They die very quickly on the swing back. The Prime is weirdly durable because of the 6 wounds. However, most of them will just, especially if you're going against Blood Angels with Sanguinary Guard, that can be a sad time. AP3 absolutely demolishes them. I do think they are better than the Winged Hive Tyrant. I think I'm going to put them directly at the top of B tier. I still like Genestealers over them just because the 5-up invuln and the devastating wounds are very strong. Don't get me wrong. I think they're a very strong pick. In fact, let's put them at the bottom of A tier. Just because they slot in more cases than I think a Winged Hive Tyrant does, and by a good margin. I just don't think that the Hyper-Adapted Raveners are as good as we thought or what we were hoping at the beginning when they were released. Moving right along, we have Raveners. Now, Raveners used to be a unit that I was super excited about because of the 3-man uppy downy and doing actions and everything like that. Raveners still have uppy downy, but they're a 5-man, which is way harder to hide, way harder to deep strike as well. So their role kind of pivots pretty hard. They also have way less attacks. They have 15 attacks. They are twin linked. They are AP2 and they are 2 damage. However, 15 attacks, you know, hitting on 3s, there's a chance where you miss a whole lot of times, and then your Raveners are sad, and then it's a 125 point unit that is probably going to be deleted pretty quickly. So for that case, I might be rating them a little bit lower than what a lot of people would think. This is considering them on their own and not attached to the Hyper-Adapted Raveners. I think attached to the Hyper-Adapted Raveners, they're probably, you just include them with where I've placed the Raveners, the Hyper-Adapted Raveners. I think they are probably better than Old One Eye and worse than a Psychophage. They're good. I love Raveners. I think Raveners are one of the coolest models out there that we have, and I like what they can do. However, their role is weird now, because for 125 points, you don't really want them as a skirmishing unit, but their data sheet and the damage they do kind of says they're a skirmishing unit. So if you're trading like, I don't know, Intercessors or a Scout Squad for a 125 point unit of Raveners, that's not necessarily a trade that I'm super, super excited on. So I'm putting them in middle of B tier. I think they're worse than a Psychophage, but better than Old One Eye. Moving right along, we have Ripper Swarms. Ripper Swarms, we're going to be real quick about this. If you have 25 points left over, maybe include them. All right. I do think that they are probably better than Norn Assimilator and then worse than Parasite of Mortrex. So near the top end of C tier, but really pick up a different enhancement. Upgrade your Hormagaunts to Gargoyles, you know, instead of including Ripper Swarms. Now, Screamer Killer. Screamer Killer was a data sheet that I thought was going to get buffs before the Psychophage got buffs. It didn't happen. It just has a mobility issue. Its base is very big. It can't really get to places that it wants to get to unless you rapid ingress it or something. I don't know. I think it's okay in Crusher Stampede, but I would rather honestly run a Haruspex or a Singleton Carnifex before I run a Screamer Killer. Maybe not the Singleton Carnifex, but still. In fact, I'm going to move the Carnifex to C tier. I'll put Screamer Killer on top of C tier. I think I actually probably would run a Screamer Killer before I run a Singleton Carnifex. However, it's close. I'm not super excited to run either. Alright, Spore Mines. They're going in Biomass. They are better than the Mucolid Spore, but please just play a Biovore, you know? Alright, Spore Assist. People who like the Spore Assist, it's a fortification. It doesn't have OC. It sits somewhere, and it dies pretty quickly. I'm going to put it directly ahead of the Spore Mine and the Mucolid, whatever it's called, because you run it before those two, but you just, I would save your points. Swarmlord. Now, Swarmlord, I feel like got a relative buff because the CP regeneration. Now, at the same time of it getting a relative buff, excuse me, it also got a relative nerf because the Winged Hive Tyrant and the Walking Hive Tyrant both went down in 30 points. Swarmlord did not go down 30 points. I still like the Vect. I think the Flamer is actually pretty strong, and its number of attacks is also very strong as well. I think he's near the top of B tier. I'm actually going to put him below a Norn Emissary. Ooh, some people might not like that pick. Let me know in the comments, you know, as long as you let me know nicely. But I think a Norn Emissary is probably better than him. It's only 20 points more. And the fact that we have access to a Walking Hive Tyrant or a Winged Hive Tyrant, that's where I'm at. I do think he has some function in some builds. I think he's probably better in Crusher Stampede. Again, with the detachment dependent thing, I think he's much better in Crusher Stampede. Being able to walk through walls, having a melee pressure as Swarmlord seems pretty strong. As well as regenerating CP so that you can cycle through your secondary deck to get the secondaries that you can score. Because sometimes Crusher Stampede is worse at scoring secondaries than something like Invasion Fleet or Vanguard Onslaught. So I think he's definitely better in Crusher Stampede. But just overall, face value, I think he is worse than a Norn Emissary, better than Psychophage. Maybe. I don't know. Psychophage is pretty good. I'm going to knock him down one more. So he's going to be worse than Psychophage, better than Raveners. I feel pretty good about that. But is he better than Old One-Eye? I don't know. You guys tell me. I'm going to... Because I could spend all day shuffling where Swarmlord is. Because I do like him. However, Termagants. I'll be honest with you. I think Termagants are not good. I do not think they're good right now. You can spam a whole bunch of them. You can run like 60 of them and run into like a swarm kind of thing. The detachment that was supposed to be good for them is not very good for them right now. So it's tough. Maybe there's a chance that people lean Swarm because Imperial Knights don't like Swarm. But it's just not, it's also not my playstyle. So I'm going to put them at the top of C tier. I think they are better than Screamer Killers, maybe. But if you're playing Termagants, you have to go full send into Termagants. You have to do like the Zoanthropes and the Venomthropes. You have to do that whole Termagant castle, or else it doesn't really function that well. I don't know. I do like their reactive move, but I just don't think they're a very strong unit right now. Tervagon. I think the Tervagon's bad this edition. I'm going to put it in the middle of C tier. I think the Parasite is better than the Tervagon. Ooh. Is a Norn Assimilator better than a Tervagon? Yes. Absolutely. I think Tervagon's better than a Harridan, but just marginally so. Invasion Fleet, you can grow it twice. You can regrow your Termagants twice. But, man, I don't know. Just the Termagant needed something else. It needed another rule or its rule to be changed. It just doesn't do very well. You know, if Termagants were a better unit, then yes, I think Termagant would also be a better unit. However, it's just not the case on both of those fronts. Moving right along, the Toxicrine. Toxicrine I'm putting on top of Biomass. Everybody's had this discussion. Everybody's had this conversation many a time. It's just how the tentacles are placed, you know. I don't need to spend too much time on it. It's really hard to use on the tabletop. In addition, its rules are not good either. Like, if it had really good rules and you could struggle through, like, moving it backwards so that it could move without its tentacles being seen and everything, that would be one thing. But the fact that it's hard to use on the tabletop and the fact that it's also not good to use on the tabletop makes it just not a good choice. And I probably would just not use it this edition. Who knows? Maybe 11th edition is the time of the Toxicrine, but not right now. A Trygon. Trygons are interesting. I think it's definitely a detachment-dependent unit. I think Subterranean Assault, you're always going to at least include one. The Trygon Prime is a very good unit. But besides that, you're probably not going to be seeing too much play of it. That being said, I think it is definitely in B tier. I'm going to put a Trygon just below Old One-Eye. Its 6-inch deep strike rule doesn't do anything. You know, it used to be 3-inch, so you could steal points from people. That was pretty cool in Crusher Stampede because it was a lot of OC, and you could just take objective markers from people. You can't do that now because it's 6 inches and it can't charge. I would be interested to see if, I don't think they're going to, but like how good would it be if it could come in 6 inches and you could charge? Who knows? But for right now, I'm going to be putting it, I think a Neurolictor is actually better than a Trygon overall. So I'm going to put a Trygon below a Neurolictor. Is it better than a Haruspex? No, I'm going to swap these two. So I think a Haruspex is actually better than Barbgaunts. I'm going to put Trygon at the very bottom of B tier. So it's just better than Termagants. It's not as bad to be in C tier because it functions very well in Subterranean Assault. It's definitely detachment dependent. Okay, Tyrannocyte. I think a Tyrannocyte is a weak choice. We just don't, like, a drop pod effect is cool, but we just don't have units that I'm really excited about drop podding, you know? I would rather just stage my units and then move them up again and then activate in a safe way as opposed to drop podding my Tyrannocyte. Like, if you put Zoanthropes in it, I don't know. I don't think you can attach the Neurotyrant and Zoanthropes in it. So then the Zoanthropes are hitting on 3s. They clear something, and then your opponent's going to be able to kill your Zoanthropes and then charge your Tyrannocyte. And that could be tough. That's not necessarily where you want to be. So I'm going to put them near the bottom of C tier. I think it is better than Hive Guard. I think it's better than the Hierophant as well. Tyrannifex. I love Arcosino Cannon, the Tyrannifex. The Rupture Cannon is sweet. AP4, D6 plus 6 damage. Oh my gosh. You can get some, and it's heavy. You can, of course, with the Exocrine, make it reroll 1s and hit on 2s. Seems very strong, although it is also very swingy. The fact that it blanks damage once per game is pretty cool too. I used to be pretty low on the Tyrannifex because it used to have the -1 damage all the time. I think actually the blanking of damage is okay. I think it's actually pretty good, and it's not nearly as much of a nerf as I used to think it was. I'm going to put it near the bottom of A tier. I think I actually like the Tyrannifex better than the hyper-adapted Raveners, just because it's so durable. It can oftentimes be a trap for your opponent to go into, because you can give it a 5-out Feel No Pain, or in Crusher Stampede, if they wound it at all, then it's hitting on 2s all of the time. Seems pretty good. And then if you get a Tyrannifex with +1 to wound on a Rupture Cannon, very, very good. Something I haven't mentioned yet is also its Acid Spray. It's got a great flamer too. D6 plus 6 shots, strength 6, AP2, 2 damage piece. I'll take it. Seems very good. I think the only thing that is stopping me from running 3 Tyrannifexes all the time is the fact that Eldar exists. and just like the Fire Dragon Meltas, just being able to absolutely demolish Tyrannifexes right out the gate is very sad. But I think the Tyrannifex is bottom of A tier. I think I actually like a Tyrannifex better than a Maleceptor. So near the middle of A tier. I think he's below a Broodlord, maybe. I'm going to go crazy. I think he's near top A tier. I could be wrong. So he's going to be below Hormagaunts and maybe just above the Genestealers. Because I think a lot of people just bring Tyrannifexes in to shore up our weakness against high toughness. And there's definitely a thing that Tyranids have. And just having a big cannon to maybe one-shot some vehicles or bigger monsters is very strong. I think it's pretty good. I love the Tyrannifex. Getting down to the wire here. Tyrant Guard. Tyrant Guard are weird. They're okay in Assimilation Swarm. They give your Hive Tyrant like 18 extra wounds that can regen and lethals on 5s. That seems good. It's fine. They don't give that, but the ability to give them that seems fine. They're just not good at hitting, right? Their Crushing Claws hit on 4s, I believe. You can do a goofy combo in Crusher Stampede if you attach a 6-man Tyrant Guard with a Hive Tyrant. You can spin the Stratagem for reroll all hits, and then if they all have the Crushing Claws, and they reroll all hits to hit and to wound. So that can be kind of powerful. But besides that, I don't think they're very good. I think they are running Assimilation Swarm because of the regrow thing. I think they're bottom of B tier. Very detachment dependent. I think I'm going to put them just below or Haruspex and better than Barbgaunts. If you're running Tyrant Guard, don't run the 3-man. Go full send into the Tyrant Guard. Do a 6-man Tyrant Guard. You're just going to get way more durability off of that. It'll be a good time. Venom Thropes. Now, Venom Thropes are kind of like the Termagant, where they suffer because the units that they want to support are not nearly as good as they should be, right? So, like Termagant Swarms not being good makes the Venom Thropes not being good. So, and oftentimes in this edition, if, in my opinion, instead of buffing things that are going to be seen, like giving them stealth, giving them cover, I would oftentimes just 100% make sure my unit can't be seen and can't be shot at. So, I don't know. My knee-jerk reaction is to think that Venom Thropes are good, but the fact that a lot of the units that they want to buff are just not good makes me feel like they're actually, I don't know. I don't love them too much. I think they're going to be relatively near the top of C tier. I think they are worse than a Carnifex. I think they're worse than a Mawloc. Better than Barbgaunts. Yeah, I like that. I think they're worse than a Mawloc, better than Barbgaunts. So they're about a third of the way down in C tier. They actually hit kind of hard. They're 70 points, so they're relatively cheap. But I just don't think they are quite doing what they should be doing, you know? And it's not their fault. Venom Thropes, you're great. It's not you, it's me. And the me is the Termagants and all the other units that Venom Thropes want to buff. So yeah. Von Ryan's Leapers. I like Von Ryan's Leapers. I think they are a good screening unit. They're kind of put in a place where a lot of units just do their job better. Like Lictors do their job better. Genestealers do their job better as like a forward pressure thing. But yeah, I don't think they're bad. I think they're really good at like screening out infiltrates. If your meta has a lot of people that have a lot of aggressive infiltrating units, you might want to have Von Ryan's Leapers in your list. But it's also another thing, like they lose to the die roll as well, because if your opponent can drop their infiltrators out, stretch them all the way across the board, and screen out your Von Ryans, then your Von Ryans don't really do anything that game. It's kind of tough. That being said, I do like Von Ryans more than I like Neurolictors. I'll say that. They're 10 points less. They fights first. They have stealth. They don't have lone op. However, they're 3 bodies versus 1. So you have to have at least 3 shots to go through, as opposed to with like a Melta, you could just maybe one-shot a Neurolictor. I could be off base on that one too. That's another good argument. Neurolictor could be better than Von Ryans. Who knows? That's where I'm feeling at this point. Moving right along, we have melee warriors. Melee warriors kind of suffered at our success from the Raveners coming out. Raveners are just basically, in my opinion, better than the melee warriors at all junctions. They're worse. Because in order for them to really function, you have to attach the Winged Prime as well. I guess maybe in the Warrior Onslaught detachment, you can run some 3-mans, and they're all right. However, I just think Raveners just do it better, you know? And the versatility of the Hyper-Adapted and the regular Raveners, saying, maybe I don't attach, maybe I do attach, who knows? But we'll see. That being said, I think they are worse than a Haruspex and better than Tyrant Guard. I think I'm pretty happy with that there. So they're near the bottom of B tier. Worse than a Haruspex, better than Tyrant Guard. Now, moving right along, ranged Tyranid warriors, even in the warrior bioform detachment, I'm not in love with them. You know, I guess you can ignore cover, but you could also just bring a Pyrovore and do that instead. They are cheap, so maybe as a kind of like a skirmishing unit in that detachment specifically could be good, but I just feel like a lot of units do that better. I do, however, think they're better than a Carnifex and worse than a Screamer Killer. So we're going to put them near the top of C tier with the ranged Tyranid warriors. I wouldn't really bring them too often, in my opinion. The Winged Prime. The Winged Prime I'm going to put just in front of the melee warriors because they're basically grouped together. So that's near the bottom of B tier. It's tough because, like, one of the positives of the Ravener brick is you can decide to attach them or not and basically have an additional unit in your list. The warriors do not have that luxury. While they're going to be a little bit cheaper, about 80 points cheaper, I believe. So you could fit like a Death Leaper in addition to having that. I just think Raveners are probably going to outshine the warriors now because they're twin linked, they're AP2, they're going to be 6 strength most of the time. It's tough because they fill pretty much the same role, except Raveners have damage too. So they're just gonna be better. So that kind of does push melee warriors and the Tyranid Prime down near the bottom of the B tier. Last but not least, Zoanthropes. I do like Zoanthropes. I think they're very good in Subterranean Assault. I think the versatility of their shots is actually not nearly as much as... It's not as good as I think a lot of people make it out to be. Just because they're kind of okay at killing both profiles. Like the last cannons that they have are not just phenomenal. You know, they don't just absolutely demolish everything all of the time. There's a lot of invulnerable saves around. And your Zoanthropes don't like to be shot back at. They can melt incredibly fast. So it's not something that is going to be a lovely thing to have shot back at. So that being said, I still think they are a pretty good unit. But I definitely think that, in my opinion, they've shifted down quite a bit. I think Zoanthropes are probably worse than Raveners. Ooh. I think I'm gonna put Zoanthropes just below the Winged Hive Tyrant. That could be another thing. If you disagree with me, I'm not gonna disagree with your disagreement, you know? But to me, I think they're worse than a Winged Hive Tyrant. They're maybe better than, like, I don't know. Part of me wants me to put them below a Norn. Just because, like, a Norn can do multiple things. I don't know. That's tough. I think... Is it Pyrovore better than Zoanthropes? We're getting into this spot, too, where we're comparing two completely different data sheets, and it's just tough. I think Zoanthropes sit somewhere near the upper end of B tier. Maybe if you really like them, just push in just barely into the bottom of A tier. So just a quick review of all of our units here. in our tier list. Thank you for hanging out and watching. This has been quite the discussion. I appreciate you hanging out with me. S tier, we have Biovore, Gargoyles, Walking Hive Tyrant, a Lictor, and Neurotyrant. I'm pretty confident about those picks. A tier, our strong choices, we have Exocrine, Hormagaunt, Tyrannifex, Genestealers, Broodlord, Maleceptor, then Death Leaper, and then Hyper-Adapted Raveners. B tier, we have the Winged Hive Tyrant, we have Pyrovore, Norn Emissary, Zoanthropes. Those are a little bit of a toss-up as to where I like them specifically. Then a Psychophage, Swarmlord, Raveners, Old One Eye, Von Ryan's Leapers, Neurolictor, Haruspex, the melee warriors with Tyranid Prime, Tyrant Guard, Barbgaunts, and then Trigon. C tier, kind of our weaker choices here. We have Termagants, Screamer Killer, the ranged Tyranid warriors, Carnifex, Mawloc, Venomthropes, Neurogaunts, Parasite of Mortrex, some people love, Ripper Swarms, Assimilator, the Termagant, Harridan, Tyrannocyte, Hive Guard, and Hierophant. And then Biomass, we don't really need to talk about them. But what we should talk about is thanking you for watching this whole thing. Comment, like, subscribe. I really appreciate all the support we've been given. You guys are incredible. You're the reason why I do this, you know? If you weren't here watching, then we wouldn't be making things for you to watch. I appreciate your time. I'll see you Wednesday. Bye, everybody.